Some of you may know VO from a security perspective. So it may be the security side of the business. Others of you are working with VO on the multi-screen or other aspects of what VO offers. But in the room, many of us, really all of us, if we're in or related to the pay TV industry, all of us have had thoughts about how is the multi-screen market really affecting me and really affecting my business. For some of you, you've not yet added multi-screen, or multi-screen hasn't had a direct impact on you yet. But many of you are considering what's going to be happening, how should I be participating in multi-screen, how is that going to play out in my business. Others of you have made a decision to add multi-screen services. And for you, you're in the process of figuring out the go-to-market strategy, or how you actually implement that in the marketplace. For others, you're in the market already, some for several years in the market offering multi-screen services. And so as you come to this event, you come thinking not so much about how do I get started, but now that I'm in the market, what do I need to do to supplement my offering to make it remain relevant? Or how can I refine my offering to make it more appealing to customers? So what I want to talk about today is really dealing with all of those issues. And out of those, under the topic of making money in multi-screen, I thought we would dwell on 4 questions. Now, as I talk to just to give you an idea, I'm Director of Research at Parks Associates, but I lead a team that focuses on entertainment and access services. So really, television, over-the-top video, broadband services, and all of the systems that allow them to be delivered to consumers. So I talk to operators around the world, from Korea, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Latin America, North America, all over, and talking to them about what they're doing, what they're seeing in the marketplace, and how that implementation plays out. And these are some of the most common questions that we as a research firm get from our customers. What's the market like? What is it like today, not just in my market, but in other markets around the world? Who's using multi-screen? So I'm thinking about buying, or I'm already in the process of being in the market. Which of my customers are using this? And what does it mean to them? What business models are successful? In many markets, TV Everywhere or multi-screen is offered as a free service. And so many are asking now, well, how do I actually turn that into money? How do I make money off of that? And then what's going to be affecting the market in the future? So we're going to dwell on those 4 areas. So what's the market like? What Parks Associates, the TV Everywhere, we actually watch TV Everywhere and multi-screen very closely because it is moving so quickly. Operators traditionally have been models of stability, trying to keep things stable in their networks and in their CPE and all of those types of things. So stability is a big part of what you do in making sure you offer a consistent service to your customers. But it seems that TV Everywhere has just skyrocketed everywhere, and there are companies jumping in quickly to be able to keep up with what's going on in the market. So we actually track TV Everywhere on an every 6-month basis. Because honestly, if we just did it once a year, the curve would go like this. And so we actually track it every 6 months. So if you look at the beginning of last year, January 2012, in North America, 86% of pay TV subscribers, and by the way, you can write this down, but you'll be getting the slides, so no need for writer's cramp, at least not yet. 86% of pay TV subscribers were able to get a TV Everywhere or multi-screen service from their current pay TV provider. In Europe, it was just over 50%. And as we look in Eastern Europe, 16%, Asia Pacific, 7%, rest of world, Latin America, everywhere else, that's 5%. As we move to July, mid-2012, you can see up to 90% in North America. In Western Europe, 2/3 of pay TV subscribers could receive TV Everywhere. Eastern Europe, over 20%, Asia Pacific, 9%. Rest of the world jumped from 5 to 18%. Anyone want to guess what part of rest of the world represented that big jump? This is the interactive part I talked about. Pardon me? Latin America. Any better guess than Latin America? Where in Latin America? Which is right, by the way. Brazil, absolutely. And what we've seen in Brazil is that over-the-top services came, Netflix and others, including local over-the-top video services, came into that market very quickly. And the operators within that market, suddenly, many of their consumers in Brazil, they were starting to develop a middle class with enough income to actually buy video services for the first time that their family has ever had video services. And so in many cases, linear TV was now competing head-to-head with over-the-top video. Because if you've never had anything but broadcast TV for free, and now you can pay for it, you actually do have to go through the decision process of, well, which do I get? And so, so that's what's going on in Brazil. As we get to the beginning of 2013, you begin to see a pattern. In North America, you can see it start to plateau and reaching 92%. Western Europe, you see a little bit of the curve starting to cool down, but 72% of subscribers in Western Europe can get access to TV everywhere. A quarter of consumers in Eastern Europe. Asia Pacific still climbing just a little bit, and rest of the world just continuing to grow. Now, as we look at the marketplace, the interesting thing is we observe the marketplace for multi-screen services. Most of us in this room really focus on the traditional marketplace, which is pay TV providers, broadcasters, content creators, and even over-the-top service providers. You may say, well, that's not really traditional. Well, the reason I include them here is because the goal behind all of these companies is very similar, which is to get content in the hands of consumers, and the core of their business is around video or video services. But if you look at their motivations, you'll be familiar with many of these. So if you're a pay TV provider, your focus is on retaining customers, or your focus is on keeping track of the immediate competition and what's going on. If you're a broadcaster, your business is around advertising. So what you want to do is you want to maximize exposure. You want as many eyeballs on your content as possible, because that maximizes revenues for you. If you're a content owner or a content creator, for you, you're interested in making sure that that content does not leak out to anyone unmonetized. So you're interested in security, and you're interested in maximizing revenue for that content. And if you're an over-the-top service, you're in growth mode. You want to reach out and expand to as many households as you possibly can, whether it's in one market or even going international to other markets, as Netflix has done. Now, what's interesting is, for all of us, is the marketplace for video competition continues to evolve, and I think we would all acknowledge now that it's not just the traditional marketplace we pay attention to. There's a whole new part of the ecosystem of non-traditional video providers that are now beginning to enter the market, or over the past few years have entered the market, and their motivations are dramatically different from everyone in the traditional marketplace. To start out with CE makers, Samsung and other CE makers, including LG, Vizio, Apple, Amazon, a number of them have now begun to offer their own video services as part of selling their devices, their smart TVs, their cell phones and other devices, tablets and so forth. Now for them, their whole focus is, I want to maximize sales. I want to maximize the sales of my devices, and I'm focused on margin. What can I do to increase the margin that I have? So for them, video is simply an opportunity to either sell more hardware or to increase the margin that they receive on each piece of hardware. So for them, anything by combining the hardware and the hardware and the content together, they're able to come up with some unique business models. Technology enablers, Google and Intel and Microsoft. Who'd have thought that Intel would have gotten into the video business, and yet they're entering the video space. And their motivation is very different again. For them, they have a vision of the world that includes their technology being the dominant technology used. And so anything they can do to leverage this hot topic, which is video, to be able to forward their technology, that's what they're doing. And so if you look at those companies, that's the motivation behind all of their initiatives into video. Retailers, Currys, Tesco, Amazon.com, others, again, a very non-traditional video players, but for them, they're seeing their packaged media sales shrink. And as they see that revenue source potentially going away or certainly reducing over time, for them, they say, well, I've got to do something to offset those losses. So they see video merely as a replacement, either through electronic sell-through or even through subscription services, as a way to offset those revenue losses. And then for social networks, and now it could be Facebook. My teenagers are telling me, Facebook, Dad, that was so yesterday. Now it's Instagram and it's all of the others, but the premise is, if you're a social network, your value, your purpose is to maximize your reach. The more households that use you, the less likely you're going to be going away tomorrow. And also advertising based. So it's a way to be able to generate more revenue. For them, Facebook and others have said they're going to leverage video as much as they can to be able to maximize that reach. Now, the reason I bring all of these up is, while we in the room are very used to competing in the traditional marketplace, until you understand the motivations and some of the things that really underscore what the motivations are on the non-traditional side, it's really hard to understand how to plan your strategy around that. So we're really talking a very different marketplace today than it has been in the past. So the next question. Who are multi-screen? Who are these people that are using multi-screen services? It's a question we get often because many operators introduced TV everywhere or multi-screen services primarily as a defense against over-the-top players coming into their market. They didn't want to lose share. They wanted to retain as many customers as they could, and so this was a hedge to make sure that they were able to do that. But now that they're starting to have people use it, they're asking the question, are these early adopters that are using it? Who is it that's actually using all of these services? Well, one of the things we do at Parks Associates, we do a number of surveys of consumers. And the data that I'm going to present today is recent data from early 2013, so just a month or two ago, a few months ago. But it includes data not only from the US, but from Europe. Now, most of the data I'm about to show you is from the US market simply because I had more data, so I was able to drill down a little further. But we find this is applicable across markets. So one of the things that we've seen in terms of users, if they're not aware of it, that they can't use it. So we start off looking at awareness. Who is aware that they even have the services available? You recall the chart that I showed earlier that showed 92% of subscribers in the US had access to these services? Well, what we see is that awareness is very low. For the first 2 years, 2010 and 2011, it was around 17–18% of consumers were all that knew that it existed. As we get into November 2012, we see that number go up, so over a quarter know that they have it. You might ask yourself, well, why is awareness so low? There are a couple of reasons. One of those is for many operators, as they were rolling out these services, they didn't want to blow the trumpets and let everybody know until they knew it was road tested and they'd actually tried it in the marketplace. The last thing that they need is calls about a new free service for technical support. So they wanted to minimize that cost. For others, it was inadequate promotion. I spoke with one of the executive vice presidents of DirecTV, a satellite operator in the US, and I said, why? Well, because for theirs, it was really low. It was like 10–12% of their customer base even realized that they had spent all of this money on content and systems to be able to do this. And he said, Brett, if I have a 30-second commercial, I'm not going to go promote a free service. I'm going to go promote what is going to bring the most return back on that marketing investment. And so I'm going to promote my highest end service. I'm going to promote my premium services. I'm not going to go promote the free service. So in many cases, even though it was designed as a defense, many customers were not finding out about it. In other cases, such as Verizon, there was a strategic decision made that they were only going to focus on those subscribers who were most likely to actually purchase via video on demand or electronic sell-through. So for them, they made a strategic decision as to who they were targeting, and for everyone else, if you found out about it, great. If you didn't find out about it, no big deal. They were really focused on maximizing revenue for it. There were a couple of other reasons. One is some consumers are naturally anxious about new video services because they feel like if they use it, somehow you'll charge them more for it, even if you put free everywhere. They see free and they think free is like the hook to get them in, but once they're in there, you're going to figure out how to charge them somehow. And so they're anxious about that. Another reason is, for many, when they think of online video, they don't think of their pay TV provider. They think of Netflix, think of Love Film. Just the top of mind for online video often is not the pay TV provider, or at least it hasn't been. And it's only very recently that that's begun to change. So if we move from awareness, one of the things as you look at awareness, a question that comes up is, as I said, are these early adopters? Who is it that's using this service? And what we found is, let me back up. So we actually found out this is European information about, European data about awareness in countries within Europe. So you can see the red is in 2011, the blue is for late 2012. And you can see how in the UK, big reason that it's a slide behind this, there we go. The big reason that it's higher in the UK, anybody want to guess what's causing greater awareness in the UK? Skygo, that's one. iPlayer, very popular. And so if you're in the UK, you know about iPlayer. So iPlayer has heightened the awareness of different services, particularly free services from Multiscreen. In France, Orange and others have offered Multiscreen, originally offering it in mobile video for quite some time. So there's a heightened awareness in France, so around 39% at the end of 2012. Germany, much lower. Belgium, much lower. In fact, in many other countries, it's much, much lower. So if we look at actual use of TV Everywhere services, what we see, interestingly, of those who are aware, about 60% use those services. So really, out of those that are aware, a very high percentage actually use those services at a minimum on a monthly basis. Now, the interesting thing is, while awareness continues to increase, you saw that jump from 18% up to 25%, 26%. Interestingly, that 60%, approximately 60%, that stays pretty level. What that tells us is these are not just early adopters. That clearly TV Everywhere has appeal beyond just the early adopter set that are interested in video. So there's something more to this group of people who are using TV Everywhere. By the way, the red line is the actual percentage of broadband households that use those services. So in the US, in November 2012, 15% of broadband households used a TV Everywhere service on a monthly basis at least. So what we decided to do at Parks Associates is we took the information that we had about TV Everywhere users, that 15%, and we compared their characteristics to the characteristics of any broadband household, just to see what would come out of that. The fascinating part about that is we found, in terms of demographics, the primary differences, slightly younger household. So the average age of, within the household, 38.5 versus 44.7 for average subscribers. So slightly younger, tends to be slightly more the Generation X or the millennials rather than the older generations. And if they have children at home, they are much more likely to be TV Everywhere users, indicating that people are putting their children in front of the tablet, in front of the smartphone, whereas in the past they might have used the VCR, DVR, something like that. They're using TV Everywhere much like that. What we found fascinating is that the difference in terms of gender, income, education, marital status, home ownership, and the number of children at home was pretty much the same between TV Everywhere users and average consumers. The one, as we go through the next couple of slides, the one I want you to remember most out of this, income. that the average income for TV Everywhere users and non-TV Everywhere users about the same. So if we look at subscriptions of premium services, what we see, the red line is TV Everywhere users, the blue line are average broadband households, or I'm sorry, average pay TV subscribers, not just broadband. So they subscribe to pay TV in the US market. And what we can see is across the board, TV Everywhere users are much more likely to use a premium service, to subscribe to a premium service. To give you an idea, out of all that we surveyed, 3% of pay TV subscribers in the US have no premium services at all, 3%. 100% of TV Everywhere users had some premium service. It could be DVR, it could be HD channels, it could be premium movie or premium sports channels, but 100%, and remember, same income level. Much more likely to have premium services, but at the same income level. Monthly video on demand use, again, you can see, now here you can really see the difference. At the top is free VOD followed by paid VOD, and that's on a television. And at the bottom you see free VOD on mobile versus paid VOD on mobile. You can see a significant difference between the TV Everywhere users and the non-TV Everywhere users. In particular, notice this right here. The paid use of VOD for TV Everywhere users actually is at parity with the free VOD use of non-TV Everywhere users. And again, same income level. If we look at the quantity of viewing, the amount of content that they view, what we see is that TV Everywhere users actually spend fewer hours watching on broadcast and DVR, but they're more likely to be spending time on over-the-top services. And not only over-the-top services, they also they spend more hours watching DVDs, video on demand on television, pay-per-view, and video from online sources. So they actually, in terms of total content watched, they watch more content, but they do it from a broader diversity of sources than non-TV Everywhere users. And this is the big one, that if you look at the spending for TV Everywhere users, they have a higher overall ARPU than non-TV Everywhere users. And that's for triple play bundles. That's not just for the video service. At the same time, one of the questions we get is, well, if they use TV Everywhere, they must be using online video, so are they more likely to cancel service, cut the cord, and use some over-the-top video service? What we found is that they are no more likely to cut the cord than non-TV Everywhere users. Now, interestingly, they are more likely to have, at some point in the past, reduced the size of their TV, the number of premium services that they have. But if you remember that the ARPU overall is higher. So even though they have reduced a part of their video service, their ARPU still is higher than non-TV Everywhere users. And then finally, their spending overall is significantly higher. So you see here, DVD rentals, 1.7 times, video rental downloads, 4 times, they spend 4 times as much as non-TV Everywhere households. Video purchase downloads, Blu-ray rental. So overall, they spend more on everything. And if you look at the consumer electronics in their home, they're very mobile. They're really much more about mobile than non-TV Everywhere users. So they average 2.6 more connected devices in their home than non-TV Everywhere households. And they're more likely to use mobile devices for email, for Facebook, and social networking to catch up on news. And over 85% use something other than a TV to watch full-length movies. How many of you, by the way, out of curiosity, how many of you in the last 2 days have watched a movie or a TV program full length on a mobile phone or a tablet? Yeah, see, we're all addicted. We all rely on each other. We'll have a little group session later today to get over all that. But 85% use it to watch full-length movies. Content industry loves hearing that number. Interestingly, average subscribers, only half, almost half use the television exclusively to watch full-length content. And for them, it's all about the fixed devices. It's the TV and it's the desktop computer. So you see very different habits in terms of consumer electronics. So if you put all of this together, it paints a very interesting picture of who the TV Everywhere user is. At its core, what it suggests is these are consumers that at the same income level, they love video. They love video, they love it from any source they can get it from. Wherever they can find the content, they're willing to pay for it. But that's what they want. They want the content that they want. They want it where they want because they have these mobile devices that are connected. And so that's where they're watching and where they're consuming all of this content. In fact, they love it so much that it begins to integrate into other parts of their lives. So while they're sitting in, you've heard the traditional story, sitting in the doctor's office, waiting for a bus, all of these other areas, that's true. That's where they are able to leverage more video into their lives because they enjoy it so much in spaces and in places where they couldn't have done it before. And that's what TV Everywhere provides them, and that's why they enjoy that. So in a very real sense, these are, whenever you are offering services and whenever you're investing in TV Everywhere, these are the type of people that are actually benefiting from those services. So the next question, now you know who is watching. So what business models out there are successful? Now, as I mentioned earlier, one thing about TV Everywhere is that whenever it came to market, many companies, particularly in the US market, I'm as Francois mentioned, I'm from the US, from Texas, so we see what's going on with Comcast and Verizon and AT&T and Time Warner Cable and all of those. For many of them, the ARPU in the US is higher, and so many of them offer TV Everywhere as a free service. And that's just the way it is in the US. What we found out is that, and many other operators have done the same, feeling that whenever they added it, they were focusing on churn reduction, they were focusing a lot on a number of these areas. And what's happened, many companies have come back and said, wow, you know, this whole buying content, giving it away for free, the whole ROI doesn't quite work out like we expected it to. So many of them are starting to look at, well, where are we finding success in the marketplace? So if we look at operators around the world, there are a few business models that we find to be common among those that are successful. First of all, using TV Everywhere, using Multiscreen as an incentive to upgrade services. A great example of, and what I mean by that is essentially, TV Everywhere is still for free, but only for those who subscribe to the highest tier of broadband or the highest tier of television services. A great example of this is Swisscom. Swisscom, in 2006, introduced TV Everywhere. They offered it as a paid service to their subscribers. Nobody took it. Nobody wanted it in the Swiss market. In fact, it was so poorly received, they actually closed it up, set it on a shelf, and left it there for a few years after they had tried it. But in 2009, as many other companies were starting to come to market, including Sky and a number of others, they actually took it back off the shelf, but instead of just introducing it as a subscription service, they tied it to the highest tier of their broadband and television service, and it was fabulously successful. It was much more success than they had really anticipated, particularly given their history with it. And so for them, they used that and were very successful, and we've seen that pattern repeated in a number of operators who, if you have a lower tier package, you can pay to get that. Hello? Okay. You can pay to get that service, but if you have the highest tier, it's for free. Another, premium transactional video on demand. What I mean by this is there is a certain portion of TV Everywhere or Multiscreen service that is for free to allow consumers to try it. But the first run content, the most valuable content, if consumers want that, then they pay extra to be able to get access to that content. And what we've seen from operators is consumers will pay for the first run content. They're most likely to pay for that content and to be able to get that. Advertising. For many, advertising is a big part of their business, but for some reason it wasn't really factored in to the original business models for many TV everywhere services. And so many didn't have ad insertion technology, didn't have a number of things that were necessary to be able to take advantage of advertising in a multi-screen environment, which, by the way, that's a non-trivial issue. Dealing with ad, because in essence, it's a different type of content that you're inserting in between the longer form content. And so dealing with advertising, that's something that for many companies have started to do that, and what we've also seen in the market overall for online video is we're starting to see the CPMs, the cost per impression, to rise. And so we're seeing more income produced off of advertising. And finally, subscription. What we're starting to see in subscription is some operators in certain markets are offering their own service as a way to potentially to non-subscribers. Sky Now, someone mentioned that. Who was it? Mentioned, there you go. Mentioned Sky Now. So Sky is doing that, where they're offering their multi-screen service to non-subscribers. Now, interestingly, we're seeing that whole trend to offer multi-screen services to non-subscribers in multiple markets. Now, one of the terms we've used for those companies is virtual MSOs. Essentially, they're providing multi-channel services outside, either to people who have not been their subscribers, or in many cases to consumers outside of their physical footprint or where their traditional footprint has been. Here are a few examples. The one at the top is from South Korea, a cable operator called CJ Television. They actually launched their service in 2009 as a free service. And they went to market, and within a year they figured out that their ROI was nowhere where they thought it would be, just based on churn. And so what they did is a year later they relaunched the service to anyone in Korea, including outside of their cable footprint. And what they saw was a significant change in their ROI, and they still offer that today. Svenaclick, that's a service offered by Telekom Serbia, and Kartina TV is a Russian TV service. These services actually focus outside of their home markets. What they're trying to do is they're trying to reach expatriates. In many cases, the average income of expatriates is much higher than the average income within their traditional footprint. And so for them, they're trying to effectively expand their effective footprint by offering those services outside of their market. Now, there are a number of challenges that they're facing, one of those being promotion. If you're trying to find an expatriate in the UK or in the US market, it's not really cost effective to do television advertising, radio advertising. So how do you reach those customers? And so they're having to come up with some unique ways to be able to reach those customers. But one of the things that they're seeing is that overall is helping to raise what the effective footprint is and raise their ROI. Now, I mentioned CE makers, and I want to bring this up because in your markets, these are some business models that you may encounter. If you recall, I talked about CE makers were able to blend video services and hardware together in a unique way to offer some new types of business models. So I wanted to go over a few of those. First of all, you have a couple that many of you may need to recall back to business school whenever you heard these. Razor and blades model, or the loss leader models. The principle is Amazon came out with very cheap hardware so that they could make money on content. And that's what they did with the Kindle. Apple had the opposite approach. They came out with expensive hardware and used inexpensive content to sell as much hardware as they possibly could. So these are a couple of examples of how CE makers are moving in the content market. Advertising. I don't know if you know this, but Samsung has already created their own advertising network for their smart TVs. So they are very serious about leveraging the smart TV interface and then the services offered through that to monetize that through advertising. And then revenue splits and slotting fees. If you have a smart TV or if you have a tablet and you have an interface that allows apps to work on that platform, one of the things you can do, particularly if you offer search and recommendation, things like that, which company do you pop up to the top? If someone is looking for video, say they're looking for the latest James Bond movie, and so someone enters that, which service do you think Samsung might pop to the top? Probably their own. But if you are a partner with Samsung, you could potentially pay Samsung so that you show up at the very top. And so we're starting to see that. And the reason I say slotting fees, that's actually a retail term. Retail, so based on where you are on the store shelves, where you're slotted on the store shelves, we're going to start seeing that in the CE environment. So for many of you, these business models are things that you may encounter as you're dealing with apps, dealing with smart TVs, dealing with tablets. Okay, what type of trends are affecting the market? I want to focus on two, because there are, in fact, if we paneled the room, we could probably come up with 50 or so different trends. But I want to focus on two in particular, and ones that we're going to touch upon during the day-to-day. First is the move to mobile. For many companies, whenever they first added a TV Everywhere service, the first thing that they did was to go to what platform? Anybody? And again, this is the interactive part of the day. I will come out there. I will bring a microphone. Oh, see, now I think back there, she's got the microphone. She will go. What platform?
iOS.
Pardon me?
iOS.
iOS, not the very first computers. I mean, the online, the web access. For many companies, when they first did TV Everywhere, it was about the computer and getting it on a computer. It's only been within the last probably 18 months, and even potentially more recently, that most operators have come out with apps for being able to view on iOS, on Android, on others. And then there's always the debate, well, do I start with Android, do I start with iOS? For some reason, nobody's doing, not as many Nokias out there, not as many Blackberries. If you have a Blackberry app, let me know. I'll write that down somewhere, because I've never seen one. But what we're seeing is a move to mobile. Part of that is enabled by many operators today are investing heavily in cloud services. Really, rather than investing in CPE on the edge of the network, many of them are investing in the ability to be able to deliver via cloud services to different parts of their network. And so as a part of that investment strategy, many of them are adding that ability to go to mobile devices. Along with that, we've seen, and I'm not going to put up the chart that shows the hockey stick that is the growth of tablets and smartphones, but we have seen massive growth in that area. Now with pay TV provider apps, most of the apps that came out originally allowed you to look at the program guide, potentially to program the DVR, and it's only been within the last, as I said, 18 months or so that they've started to add delivery of multi-screen video to these platforms. The other thing that pay TV providers are facing, however, is there's now a fight for the apps. So if you're using apps, right now on average, by the way, consumers use monthly about 8 to 10 of the apps regularly on their phone or tablet, about 8 to 10. And if you think about it, you think, oh, that's the email, that's the calendar. So there are about 8 to 10 apps that consumers use regularly. So that means that if you're an app on the phone or you're an app on the tablet, you're fighting to get into the top 10. And not everybody can be in the top 10. And that's a challenge. And so we're seeing, as we see in the market, we're seeing broadcasters, we're seeing content creators, we're seeing apps for specific content assets come to market. One of the ones that I show here, the one between Shazam and TBS, that's for a particular show in the US called The Big Bang Theory. So they have an app specifically about their content, about that one piece of content. The other thing is that we're seeing the role of the mobile device change in the home. How many of you have sat in your living room at some time with the family there, the television on, and at the same time everyone is doing this with their phone or with their tablet? Anybody? Yeah, see? I have 3 teenagers, so whenever we're all together watching TV, there are 6 devices. There's the television, and all of us have our own device that we're using. And so the role of the mobile device has started to play a bigger role in the whole experience of consuming video. Now, the other thing that we're seeing, other trend that we're seeing, is really around content discovery. One of the blessings and one of the problems that we have in the video industry is there's an overabundance of content, shall I say. There's a saying in the US that I've got 200 channels, but I can't find anything to watch. And so I can spend 10 minutes going through all of the channels to see what my options are. And eventually, after 10 minutes, I give up, or I just finally stop and start watching something there. One of the things the OTT services did very successfully is, rather than using the TV as the interface, in many cases they use the computer. So you can find the content there and set it up, and then you have kind of your preferences, and that's all set up so when you get to the television, much easier to be able to use it. The other thing that we're seeing a difference in is, in many cases, the television was originally designed around the passive experience. I want to find a channel, I want to sit back, I want to watch TV. But in many cases, discovery is whenever you use the remote control, up, down, left, right. That's how it's much more active in that sense. And so a lot of what we're seeing in content discovery now is how do we keep the passive experience as part of TV? And how do we also enable consumers that want an active experience to be able to find content as quickly as possible? Which is really important, because what we find is the faster that consumers can be matched to their content, the more satisfied they are by the service that they receive. Because at the end of the day, they're watching more content because they find it faster. And so that's what they enjoy. Personalization. One of the ways that you're able to get them to content faster is you tailor it to them. And so personalization has become a bigger and bigger issue. And as part of personalization, creation of profiles, essentially aggregating information about use, about preferences, about a number of things about consumers, and then having that available to be able to refine what the options are that they're offered. The role of social. A number of companies have used social networking and tried to leverage social networking in a number of ways. Some tremendously unsuccessful. There are companies that have put Twitter feeds on the side beside the video, so you can see what Twitter is about, the particular content that you're watching. There are Facebook. You can see Facebook pages and Facebook postings about content. There are some companies that have experimented there. By the way, as the father of 3 teenagers, let me tell you, no teenager wants their Facebook page on the big screen where everyone can see it. So, lesson learned. But what we're starting to see is companies are not just showing that information, they're starting to integrate that social content into the discovery process, which is it's a challenge, because while I receive a lot of recommendations from my friends, there are a lot of my friends that I don't care what they watch. I wouldn't watch what they wanted to watch anyway. My wife, she and I there's like a 2% overlap between what I watch and what she watches. And yet, we're Facebooked with each other. So how do you balance that? How do you balance that effectively? And at the end of the day, you've got to do better than just aggregating all the social together, because effectively that's just measuring what's the most popular in the market, which is Nielsen ratings or something else like that. So how do you balance that out? And finally, adding mobile. One of the things we're seeing, particularly with younger consumers, they're much more likely to start the viewing experience with the mobile device. So they'll start with the mobile device, they'll figure out what they want to watch, and then they'll pick something on the TV. And so we're seeing that more and more. So what are the implications of all this? We've talked about what's going on, who's watching, business models, and a number of the trends. So there are a number of implications for all of us here. First of all, multiscreen is no longer a differentiator. One of the things we're seeing in the market, initially companies got involved in multiscreen because they wanted a first mover advantage, they wanted to have some differentiation in the market, and what we're seeing now is just checking that box that you have multiscreen, that's just the start. It does allow you to participate in the market, but it's no longer, in most markets, no longer something that sets you apart. So another thing, whenever you're using TV Everywhere and whenever you're investing in it and using it, that ultimately is benefiting those who are your best customers and who spend the most for your service. Those are the customers that you want to keep. Another implication, there are options outside of free as well as outside of subscription and transactional. We talked about those. So there are a number of companies who've looked into these business models, and there are a number of options out there. Another implication, and I can't emphasize this enough, and that's the value of the interface. Because in a very real sense, the interface that you have is your service. I mean, that is how you are defined in the mind of the consumer, is through that interface. And so how that experience, how that user experience, how they experience that interface, that's key to ultimately how they perceive your service. And finally, one of the things that we're seeing among operators is, while TV Everywhere and Multiscreen was originally introduced as kind of a sideline or an extra to video, what we're starting to see now is companies figuring out how they integrate Multiscreen into their core set of offerings to then leverage that to be able to benefit broadband, television, and even mobile services. So we're beginning to see that integrated into that. So that's a summary of some of the things that we've seen at Parks Associates. Let me open up the floor to any questions that you have. And again, interactive part of the day. So, any questions? Now, don't make me come out there, because you know I will. I will leave the stage like that. No?
Did you find any pay TV operator that offers TV service for additional subscription? The people pay on top of their...
Are they paying on... So are there operators, I believe if I understand the question you're asking, are there operators that are offering TV Everywhere as a separate subscription?
No, on top of the subscription, where people pay, say, extra $5 per month.
So as a premium? So are they offering it as a premium subscription over the top of... Yes. Yes, there are some that are doing that. Sky Now is an example of that. Now, for Sky Now, it's for free, but one of the things we expect that we'll see in the future is there will be a tier of free services, free content available to many subscribers, and then there will be a subscription service that for more premium content over the top of that. In the US, there are a number of premium movie channels, and many of those channels, such as HBO and Stars and others, they offer a multi-screen service for those who subscribe to their particular channel, so that's similar. Another example we see in the US is Verizon. They've partnered with a company called Redbox. If you go to the US, there are these big red boxes at almost every pharmacy and grocery store that have physical discs that you can rent for like $1 a night. Verizon has partnered with that company to offer an online service, an online video service. So that's how Verizon essentially, it's a subscription service, and so they're actually have that as a value add subscription over the top of their video service. So it's a good question. Others? Yes?
So you were talking about higher CPM for,
So you were talking about higher CPM for TV Everywhere advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that translate in terms of global numbers, linear versus TV Everywhere?
Yeah. When I said that, it's for CPM, actually not just for TV Everywhere, but for online video overall. We've seen a trend over the last 2 years of those CPMs increase. I don't have the specific numbers with me. We actually have an analyst at Parks Associates who, her specialty is advertising and keeping track of that. But one of the things is, Overall, globally, we're seeing those CPMs increase for online video. The other thing that we're seeing increase is the number of ad impressions per video increase also. So essentially, the ad load for each asset is also increasing. Now, the challenge there is how do you balance it so that consumers, at a certain point, consumers are like, well, this is too many ads. I'm just not going to watch that anymore. So how you balance that, that's a very difficult balancing act, and different companies are balancing it in different ways. But we're seeing both of those increase, and so that's leading ultimately to greater advertising revenues. Another good question. Anything else? Yes?
How about churn reduction? Do you have any figures about how efficient is that?
You know, we don't, and that's one of the real problems with multiscreen and using churn. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was churn reduction. Do we have any numbers that show particular metrics or particular amount of churn that's been reduced by multiscreen? And the real problem that you have, even as a company that focuses on surveys and does a lot of that work, how do you tell if someone churns from one service to another? Was it because a support issue? Maybe they had a bad experience. Was it because, you know what we actually found the biggest impact on churn was? Moving from one house to another had the biggest effect on churn. In many cases, we will ask which of the following factors impacted your decision. And in many of those cases, the availability of online video was a contributing factor, but it wasn't the cause. Probably 80 or more percent of churn, particularly in the US market, was economic. There were economic situations that forced them to discontinue or to downgrade a video service. And in many cases, within 12 months, many of those came back to pay TV as their economic condition improved. Yeah, the real benefit of pay TV is it's easy, honestly. You turn on a channel and it plays, and it just keeps playing, and the content just keeps coming. There's a lot of it, and on a cost per minute basis for the amount of content, it's a pretty good bargain. And so there are a lot of consumers who really like that. Well, thank you all for your questions.